Could there be a trade on the horizon for David Stearns and the New York Mets in the event that Pete Alonso walks in this MLB free agency? We are getting into that right here on the True Mets Talk podcast. What's up, Mets fans? Welcome back to the channel. Welcome back to the True Mets Talk podcast. In this ongoing saga of Pete Alonso this offseason, we are talking about a couple of trade targets and a recent report coming from Pat Ragazzo in relation to the Mets first base situation. Before we get fully into this video and break down two potential trade targets, please do smash those thumbs up buttons on this video. Subscribe to the channel if you enjoy these discussions, if you enjoy these conversations surrounding our beloved New York Mets, and make sure to go ahead and comment your thoughts and opinions down below on all of the latest reports and news coming from Mets land. Okay, over the last few days, we've seen a plethora of reports coming from the New York Mets in their pursuit, or maybe lack thereof, of Pete Alonso. Different offers on the table, different meetings between Pete Alonso and other teams, whether it's the Blue Jays or whether it's the Angels. And we also have this report from Sports Illustrated's at Ragazzo, Mets beat reporter over there at SI. Sources: Pete Alonso met with the Angels back on Thursday. This is going to be released on Sunday morning for you all. I'm recording this, by the way, on Saturday afternoon, so hopefully no major breaking news happens, just for a little bit of context, but that the Mets are actually considering a trade for Detroit Tigers first baseman Spencer Torkelson. And the article, which I highly suggest you all go on Pat Ragazzo's X account and click on to read further for more context, goes into the possible scenarios that could be on the horizon for the New York Mets. So given this, if the Mets are actually serious about trading for a guy like Torkelson, and if they actually project that Pete Alonso is going to walk elsewhere, it would make sense to try to go ahead and get an external candidate to backfill the first base position, at least for the 2025 season. Now, in the video that I posted yesterday, we talked about the internal route. We went over projections for Mark Vientos and Brett Beatty. I think that is definitely on the table for the New York Mets, but it is not the best of options. The external route is still the route that I would go down in the event that Pete Alonso is not a New York Met. But every report that comes out, my confidence, I cannot lie, dwindles down even further. So let's talk about Spencer Torkelson, and then we'll talk about another trade candidate that I have right thereafter. And if you tuned into our Mets Hot Stove Live the other night, you'll know who exactly I'm going to be talking about in my preference over Spencer Torkelson. But since we have this report from Pat Ragazzo, this is the outlook of Spencer Torkelson. A monstrous 2023 campaign. He's 25 years old. He was 24 at the time in the 2023 season, posting 30-plus home runs. You see right there on your screen, 31 home runs, a .233 batting average, and an OPS that was right around 750 in 159 game sample size. Just a great all-around season for such a young player like Spencer Torkelson. But something changed. The outlook changed and the production level changed for Spencer Torkelson offensively in the 2024 season. Only 92 games. At one point, the Tigers actually sent him down for a little bit. Spencer Torkelson only hit 10 home runs. He cut the home runs from the previous season by a third, all the way down to 10, and also only posted a .219 batting average with an OPS right around 670. It was not a good season at all from Torkelson. Now, I will say, and I will caveat this by stating that the defense from 2023 to 2024 for Torkelson actually got better. He was in the negatives in the defensive run saved category, and he went into the positives. I believe he was a +2 in the defensive run saved category in 2024. So at least the defense was there for him in a lackluster offensive season in 2024. You are banking at that point on the upside that you saw in 2023. Again, there's a lot of upside to be had with Torkelson and what he posted, but the 2024 numbers alone do not inspire much confidence, especially if you're trying to sell the fan base on this being a Pete Alonso replacement. The doubles, gap-to-gap power, we're not even talking about home runs at this point, decreasing by a pretty good margin. The strikeout rate increasing by over 2.5%. The walk rate decreasing by over 1%. And from there on out, per Fangraphs, the weighted runs created plus is naturally going to decrease by about 16. But even more concerning when we're talking about Pete Alonso's struggles with runners in scoring position, which is essentially what everybody, including myself, had a problem with in his 2024 campaign, was the lack of production with runners in scoring position. Spencer Torkelson also had the same problem. With runners in scoring position, if you look at the baseball reference page in the splits, 187 batting average and a 539 OPS. So again, I have no doubt in my mind that he can have a bounce back type of season. This is essentially where you could dangle Brett Beatty in front of the Detroit Tigers because they have a clear need at third base. They have Gleyber Torres at second base. They'll move Colt Keith over to first base, and that boots Torkelson away from that everyday role at first base. You know, exchanging a struggling potential everyday player for another struggling potential everyday player, Torkelson for Beatty, could work. I have my reservations that the Tigers are going to make that trade 1-for-1, and maybe it takes an additional prospect from the Mets, in addition to Brett Beatty, to land a guy like Torkelson. Now, the contract is advantageous because he is so young. He has about 3 or 4 years left of control. But we're talking about a win-now team with the New York Mets. And banking on a resurgence from Torkelson is a huge risk. So let me propose another first baseman that could be available and could have his everyday status taken away by a prospect in that respective organization, a little bit more of a veteran player and a lot more of a consistent player. And this is my pick if the Mets go the external route to try to replace Pete Alonso. And I will say, before I go any further, neither of these guys, Ryan Mountcastle, who I'm going to be talking about right here from the Orioles, nor Torkelson from the Detroit Tigers, they are not Pete Alonso. The power aspect, the gap-to-gap power, the consistent 30-plus home runs, these are not the types of players that they are. So they cannot match Pete Alonso in that sense. But what is the most consistent path for the Mets in trying to at least replicate that Pete Alonso power now that you have Juan Soto on board? I'd go down the Ryan Mountcastle route. And the consistency here from Mountcastle is everything. The Orioles, it's a little bit more of a tricky situation when you're dealing with the Orioles because they have such a strong farm system. I don't particularly know the ins and outs of what they need, but I know that they have Kobe Mayo and they have a trajectory where they could put him as an everyday first baseman, and they could be going down that route, which essentially moves Mountcastle to an everyday DH spot now that Santander is gone. But with 2 years left on his contract, before he's inevitably an unrestricted free agent, they might try to get some value out of him. But here are the numbers for Ryan Mountcastle. 2023 was definitely a better year for him, but 2024 wasn't bad on paper. 115 games in 2023, 18 home runs, and a 270 batting average. And this is where the consistency comes into play here for Ryan Mountcastle. When you take a look at that batting average, if you're so inclined to do so, if you value that statistic. 124 games in comparison in 2024, 271 batting average with only 13 home runs. Now, Mountcastle is going to get you anywhere from 15 to 25 home runs. That's the type of player that he was prior to the 2024 season. You rewind a couple years back, he actually had a season where he hit 30-plus home runs. So he has that in his back pocket. It's just not going to be as consistent as Pete Alonso, as I just mentioned. But a 733 OPS in 2024 and a 308 on-base percentage is basically the production that you'd get. And he could also be a right-handed DH. In the unlikely event that the Mets move Starling Marte, he could switch over there, and you could also still play Mark Vientos at least on a, semi-regular basis at first base if that's what you're inclined to do. But I would imagine if the Mets make this move for Mountcastle, he would be more so an everyday first base option and just keeping Jesse Winker at the DH spot. And we know Jesse Winker has taken reps at first base. He's willing to play first base, as is Mark Vientos. And now the Mets are having Brett Baty take reps at first base. It really does seem at this point that the Mets are shifting their focus towards a life without Pete Alonso. But from 2023 to 2024, really the consistency transferred into the K rate. I mean, you don't see that drastic of a difference in the strikeout rate. He hit more doubles from 21 to 30, and the weighted runs created plus there wasn't really that much of a wide margin. Now, the walk rate, a little bit alarming, around 2.5% less of a walk rate. So maybe he became less patient at the plate, maybe chasing a lot more pitches than he did in 2023. And that's something to look out for from Ryan Mountcastle. But when you take a look at the runners in scoring position metrics, it's night and day different from what Spencer Torkelson provided in 2024. Ryan Mountcastle with runners in scoring position hit 289 with a 756 OPS with runners on. He probably won't drive in as many runs as Pete Alonso, and he won't put many balls over the fence just like Pete Alonso did in his entirety of his career. But if you can get competent veteran players, at this point, Mountcastle is approaching his age 28 season, entering the prime of his career. You definitely have him for 2025 and for 2026 if you wanted to. But you could pivot at that point in 2026 free agency to get your everyday first baseman if Pete Alonso is not on board for the foreseeable future. So Mets fans, let me know. Spencer Torkelson has been discussed by the New York Mets. We don't have anything concrete coming between the Orioles and the Mets for Ryan Mountcastle. But if you're thinking about bringing Spencer Torkelson on board, it doesn't hurt to call up the Orioles and see if Mountcastle is available. So I wanted to provide you all options on the table because, quite simply, the options are dwindling outside of Pete Alonso. Smash those like buttons. Let me know what you think about the outlook of these two potential external trade candidates. It's the True Mets Talk podcast. I'll catch you all in the future video or stream. It's your boy CP. Peace.